Hello. Thank you so much for joining me on this discussion that I'm just interested in and I wanted to talk about it. So let's talk about it. Why are parents of mixed children divorced? Why are so many interracial marriages, it seems, ending in separation? And what's the difference between the separation between same race couples and interracial interracial couples? What's the difference between the separation of same race couples and interracial couples? I want to think about the common thread of interracial marriages between the years 1960 and approximately 2000 specifically. The civil rights movement began approximately the year 1954, and it started a lot of movement between Black people wanting more rights in America, and some white people joined in on the movement. We were now kind of blending the society between Black people and white people, and Black people trying to get the same rights that white people had at the time. But between interracial relationships and marriages, there's a different fabric that binds these people together. They blend cultures and create a new subset of culture with their children, mixed or biracial children. I will cover three sections mainly and give a general overview why I believe that there's a pattern of interracial marriages specifically separating and a common thread that I feel with a lot of these relationships ending. And the first one being the rebellion is over. I've been wanting to talk about Rebecca Walker for quite some time. Her autobiography is very, very interesting and it reads like a movie. She goes through a lot of things during her childhood, including having abortion in high school, her mother being a writer and creative, Alice Walker, and her parents divorcing when she's young and traveling across the country every 2 years in order to see her mother and her father. Rebecca Walker says that her parents met in 1965 in Jackson, Mississippi. They are idealists, they are social activists, they are, quote, movement folk. They believe in ideas, leaders, and the power of organized people working for change. They believe in justice and equality and freedom. Rebecca Walker's father is a liberal Jewish person. I feel like I can't say that. Okay, who believes these abstractions can be realized through the swift, clean application of the law. Her mother believes that they can be cultivated through the tellings of stories, through the magic ability of words, to refine and create subjectivity. Her mother is newly Black, and her father comprised an interracial couple. Rebecca Walker describes herself as a movement child, but what happens when that novelty kind of wears off? Her parents being together is a defiance altogether, but what happens when that's their everyday? It's kind of like when your parents tell you not to do something. Let's say you want to go to the movies with your friends every Friday night at 9, and they have trouble with that idea and they don't want you to do that. And you feel it's a rebellion. It's going against the grain to do something that people around you don't want you to do or feels different from their own view of normalcy. In a lot of cases, it makes you want to do that more because it's a rebellious act. It's defying what is normal, and it's kind of fun to do that. But then, if your parents are okay with that idea and they don't mind it anymore or don't care at all, it kind of ruins the essence of what that essential desire was to do. Wanting to rebel and do something foreign, outlawed, is not there anymore. The essence of doing something different and provocative isn't there anymore, and it's kind of worn off, and it may make you not even want to do that activity anymore. Rebecca Walker proves this in saying that even though her father goes off to work at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund every day and her mother keeps writing books about Black people and their experiences, they are no longer held together by a web of folk committed to the transgressive nature of their union. Especially during this time in the civil rights movement, Black on Black love was the new recipe for revolution. Mulatto or half breed children are tainted with the blood of the oppressor, as it was seen by a lot of Black people during this time, who were actively advocating and walking for the progression of rights for Black people in America. They saw white people as a hindrance to this movement. They had a lot of mistrust for certain white people at this time, especially those getting in relationships with black people. They felt that it was taking a lot of attention away from black women in particular. Section 2, it's simply too foreign. In the case of the civil rights movement, too, black women that were in relationships with white men at this time were ridiculed in public and by family on a day to day basis. Being ridiculed by family members in specific really takes its toll, and in some cases, black women who dated or married white men found that they could not endure the harassment and prosecution by black and white people. Early on in the novel, Rebecca Walker's parents get divorced, and it kind of sets up the entire storyline of her life. Traveling between two separate states that her parents eventually moved to and continue both of their separate careers, her dad as a lawyer and her mother as a writer, and kind of progressing on in their careers. Rebecca Walker talks about this shift in a quote here. She says, "My little copper colored body that held so much promise and broke so many rules. I no longer make sense. I am a remnant, a throwaway, a painful reminder of a happier and more optimistic, but ultimately unsustainable time." What is she saying when she says this? She's pointing again to the changes within the civil rights movement, having an emphasis on black love, and the continuation of ridicule for two black women that were in relationship with white men. But she's still here. She's still the remnant of their relationship. She has to endure this huge shift and separation of her parents, and there's no reference point for her family to rely on. We use our childhood, something that's familiar to us, as a reference point for what our relationships, friendships, and romantic relationships should look like in our lives. Unconsciously, we look for reference points for normalcy to know what our friendships and romantic relationships should look like. So it can be difficult then in an interracial relationship to know what to expect, how to blend these two different cultures. There's nothing from our upbringing to emulate, no example that's been set for us before. And especially during this time, there was two completely different cultures. Black people on one hand, white people on another. Especially for Rebecca Walker, who was Jewish, there was a completely different set of cultural expectations and customs that her father had that her mother had never really learned of before. Rebecca Walker also says that on her first birthday, she's given chitlins and chocolate cake, which are two of her favorite foods. Her father walks to another side of town and gets her chitlins. And it kind of notes that her family at this time, before they separated, when they were in the same house, they were creating this completely different subculture. They're creating this completely different subculture with blending cultures, values, customs. And that's really noble at this time, how it seems important for her mother to show her things that are important to her Jewish father, and on conversely for her Jewish father to, but she says that this is unsustainable, especially when faced with criticism from family and outsiders on a day-to-day basis. It's hard for her family to blend these cultures and specifically blend them with her extended family. Also, when talking about no reference points or points of normalcy, we see this and know this with domestic abuse relationships. People seek familiar patterns. They point out and attach to people that feel familiar to people that they knew in their childhood. That's where we get the term daddy's issues for people that have a lack of trust in men from their upbringing, and seek out partners that are emotionally unavailable or detrimental to their upbringing. A lot of times they bring that a person with similar characteristics into their adulthood. In some unfortunate situations, this creates generational domestic abuse relationships. A lot of times, the interaction that our parents or people that we grew up with, our guardians, set the tone of normalcy that we seek out later in our lives. They may not tell us exactly, but they show us in the way they interact with each other. And for a blended family, that can be hard because being friends with white people growing up is completely different from having a romantic, intimate relationship with a white person now in your adulthood. You learn a new set of cultural family expectations, rituals, customs, food that you may not have heard of before. And it's important for you to embed that in your household and now your own life. You want to do this for your potential children, for your spouse, so that they seek comfort in knowing that the rituals and customs that they grew up with, they can still see that in their adulthood, in their everyday life now. There's also an aspect of potential race issues that your partner may understand but never fully comprehend on a level of experiencing it firsthand. To know the depth, to feel it, is different from hearing it told by someone else. What it is like to be a black person. You must be aware of this. Someone that you choose as your partner to be your emotional boat, to tell the good and bad of what happens in your day. They may not understand certain racial topics that you tell them. For certain racial topics, they may be starting from scratch. You may be telling them firsthand, teaching them in a way, and educating them on things that they never acknowledged before. Question three is America specifically. I haven't lived in another country other than America to know the historical standpoint of Black people and white people and the relationships that they have. But in America, it's very long and it's very dirty. You have to trust this person to know that 100 years earlier, they would have been on the right side of history, that they would have been an ally for Black people. A personal anecdote I have is I was friends with a mixed person when I was in high school, and I was actually doing this person's hair. We ran track together, and she told me that she wanted to get her hair done. I was doing hair at the time, and I agreed to do her braids. She had never gotten braids before, so she had a lot of questions for me at this time. And she mentioned that, she didn't want to have to do her hair every day for school. Um, and so she wanted braids so she could keep them in for a couple weeks at a time. Her mother did not know how to do her hair. And this is a similar sentiment that a lot of biracial kids feel. I have other family members that mention that their white mothers never learned how to do her hair. Hair is very personal. It can be a bonding point. It could be a spiritual point for people that decide to get dreads. And your own mother not knowing how to do your hair, not understanding or caring to understand your hair is kind of odd. And that could be very difficult, especially for a child growing up that their own parents don't know or understand a certain aspect of themselves. That a parent must care about understanding your black history. They must care for you, their child. Now their family, and they must understand that even though they didn't grow up with certain differences that they're seeing now in their child, that they should care to understand that this is something that's important, especially for someone growing up, that their parent understands them. Imagine your own mother never interacting with your hair or touching your hair or even doing your hair in the morning to get ready for school. That can be really just weird to experience. I feel that the most devastating thing with the novel that Rebecca Walker later talks about is her father, once her parents are divorced, kind of turning away from her blackness, choosing to not acknowledge it and or care about the difficulties that she tries to confide in him for. He ignores this part of her now. He chooses to ignore it. Later on, her father remarries a Jewish woman and has, quote, a big Jewish wedding with a big blue velvet huppah and wall to wall Jewish people. She says that, quote, I watched as my mother's soft, curvy brown body is replaced by my stepmother's thin, pointy white one. You have to wonder if this is something that her father thought about previously for a long time beforehand. Not necessarily a new woman or new wife, but this normalcy, this conforming to his cultural upbringing. He is no longer ridiculed by his parents, and it's easier for him to instill certain customs and traditions in his household with his now new Jewish wife. They decorate with a menorah for Hanukkah, and it reminds him of his own childhood, something that his mother did, decorating for the holidays. It certainly is easier for him. But then there's Rebecca, the daughter on the outskirts, left to remain, someone they must accommodate for, even though they really don't. It's terrible. They move out of Brooklyn, where her father was practicing law, and now to a suburb in Larchmont. Later, when Rebecca confides in her father about being one of the only black kids in her new school, she says that her father tells her that she's exaggerating. She says, quote, I want to kill him. But more than that, I want to kill my white, holier than thou, perfect Jewish stepmother because I'm convinced this whole place is her dream and not his. And because I'm convinced if it wasn't for her, my father would still be mine and listen to me and would tell me to be proud of who I am, that I was born for a reason, and that being black and white is better than being just one, and screw people who can't deal. She wanted reassurance from her father. She needed that reassurance as a child, especially with so much change going on, her moving to a completely different place and a new school and having a completely different racial demographic at her school and maybe not relating to a lot of the kids that she sees around her. She continues growing up like this, switching between two completely different places and two completely different racial demographic groups. She says growing up, I did not ever feel contained. I never felt the four walls of my room or my apartment or my house or my town or my culture close around me. I never knew the feeling of the extended womb. My parents did not hold me tight, but encouraged me to go. It is only when she's older that she's able to reflect on her childhood experiences and feel solace within herself and her mixedness, her identity, that she begins to love. I hope that this is the same for others, that we're all able to seek a new feeling of home, however we can. The end. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed, and please leave any comments, any discussion. If you felt any similar sentiments or had any thoughts, please leave them below, and I will read every single one of them. Thank you so much. Goodbye. Becca Walker says that her parents met in 1965 in Mississippi, Jackson. Okay.